So Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Martin, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had this whole storyline planned out about how I'm going to introduce you. And then you come in and tell me, hey, should I tell everybody how I got bit in the ass this weekend? So I feel like we have to go there and start with that.
So, against my better judgment, because my wife at some point may stumble across this, but yes, I did. Got bit in the buns by a dog. So I'm a avid runner. Classic running route. I was running down a dead end street, saw two dogs with their owner, and thought to myself, "Hey, I shouldn't do this," but in my disciplined way, I was running to the end of the street. As I turned around, the dog jumped up and chomped me. So,
No stitches?
no stitches, but a tetanus shot, some antibiotics, and a few hours wasted on the weekend, and
Ugh,
off I go.
wow. I, what a way to start a podcast, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, I mean, the running part, let's talk a little bit about that because, you and I go back a few years. And when we first worked together, I remember standing up and doing a kickoff to a pretty large audience of the company that we were working with at the time. And you piped up and you were pretty impressed by this, but you were piped up and like, hey, by the way, Martin's running the Chicago Marathon this weekend. And, it's kind of off the cuff, but it was just one thing. And then just to realize that just a handful of years later, you start doing Ironman. So tell me that journey.
So, the journey itself, I think, starts with just a desire to do something different. And, when I heard that you were doing a marathon, for me, I've always been somewhat athletic, but thought, wow, that's a huge, huge distance. Only 1% of people do it.
Yeah.
I'm not that fond of running, or hadn't been. And, I thought to myself, hey, why not do something different, stretch it a little bit. And, a friend of mine talked me into doing an Ironman. So,
I was not that friend, by the way.
right.
I have not done an Ironman, though. Plenty of alternative options, yeah.
I think as part of that, it's work life, personal life, physical life, mental life, like just always striving to do something that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And, stretching yourself, stretching myself. That was something I didn't know how to swim when I started. So,
Right.
just the journey of set what seems like an insurmountable goal, and then get after it, have discipline, and do it.
Has that just served you well in your life, just this idea of discipline and getting better? Or was there a time where you plateaued and you didn't really have that drive?
I would say yes, it's absolutely served me well, and there have been ups and downs along the way. Growing up, I was the type of kid and type of person that if someone said you can't do it, I was going to find a way to do it, and luckily, generally did. Through various different phases of my life, a couple of times I got comfortable and felt like, oh, I've achieved something. This is good.
Right.
Luckily, I'm blessed to be married to a wonderful woman who helped kind of nudge me out of that comfort zone. And, even today, striving to do more and do something different, like continual growth, I think, in business, in personal life, that's what we as humans, I think,
Right.
all hopefully strive for.
And how does it help you being the leader you are?
Leadership, in my opinion, is more about developing followership than having a absolute plan. So, I think one of my strengths as a leader is being able to build a team around me, to influence where I don't have authority, and be able to have people want to follow, and not just in one instance, but in future projects, future happenings.
Yeah.
So I think it's if people see you as someone who's going to be successful, people want to win. So if you protect the right environment and the right culture, have aligned goals, make sure everyone's bought in and moving forward in the same direction, that's key in getting results and adding value.
Yeah. I mean, the whole leadership thing is an interesting topic, right? And one of the favorites, I've got a friend who always says leadership by definition for him means influence. And so I get that, but I heard one recently and I thought this is also brilliant. And you mentioned followership. It says if you're ahead of the pack and you head forging forward and you look back and nobody's behind you, you're not leading.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought that's just such a clear way of looking at it too, because there is something about influence and curiosity. There's very many characteristics that define leadership.
I think one other characteristic that defines good leaders is being comfortable in not knowing everything.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, you don't want to be in front of a group and be out on your own. Like I'm more than happy to surround myself with people that are smarter than I am, better than I am, and set up those people to their strengths so that it is a wedge moving forward as opposed to a small pointed spear.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you.
So Martin,
Yes.
you asked me about
Yes.
how did I take the step to doing something that is pretty, I'd say, remarkable from a physical. Not many people do one Ironman, much less 10. How
Right.
you've done some pretty impressive ultra
Yeah.
running things. So like what motivates you to do something like that?
It's very similar. I think there's a bunch of things that challenge me that I have to actually work on internally, like fear of failure. So when I put my mind to it, I'm very goal-oriented, but then when I'm in it, I don't want to fail. And so that's often what pushes me through to the finish line. I'm being a pilot as well. And one of the things that you learn as a pilot is that there's something called pushing the envelope. It's the structural limits of the plane, right? And so I've always loved that term. I didn't know it until I became a pilot at what it really meant, but I think that's part of my goals. And so I set a goal, and that's then just my way of trying to get there and over time. But you're right. I mean, the thing that actually drives me at the end of the day is I want to constantly be putting myself into a different position, something unique, that something challenges me as well. And it's not always, for instance, I'll give you an example. So I have a friend who's run 20 Chicago marathons. Okay. And I was like, why? Like, I get it, but why not go run New York or LA? And so the variety is something that I am drawn to. I'll do different adventures, different things for that reason. I'll either go to do cycle trips or hiking trips or kayaking trips, whatever it is. But it's the variety that, and I think that's part of what also drives me, because it's the adventurous spirit that moves it forward. Yeah.
I learned something new. I didn't know you were a pilot, so that's
okay.
I'll have to fly with you sometime.
Yeah, that'll be great. Next time we'll go flying first, and then we'll come and have a podcast. So let's kind of come back to that moment when we did stand in front of the company we were working for at the time, and we're saying, hey, we're going on this transformational journey. And it's such an overused word too, transformation. But a big part of it was really trying to get the organization to leverage the technology, in this case SAP, in a way that could drive the business forward. There's a lot of fear, again, right? A lot of people didn't want to be challenged. A lot of people didn't want to change. There was a lot going on in that time. As a leader, and particularly a CIO, how did you approach that, and where do you think you would have done something different to have made that maybe even more successful than it was?
Yep. So a little bit more context to the background. There it was a middle market company, privately held, very successful, with a leadership team saying, hey, how do we get from single digit growth every year but healthy to something much more? And it was clear that everyone loved the brand, everyone loved the company, people were working hard, but the things that we had done from an IT and a business perspective in the past weren't going to get us where we needed to go. So the first step was, okay, understand what we have and understand the limitations. In that case, one of the limitations was we were good at solving problems with people, human middleware we called it, and just adding bodies. And in addition to that, giving the good players more of different tasks, as opposed to saying, hey, in a normal, in this case, it was a sales and operations planning process, you are good at one thing, so why not take a little bit of another job and give it to you? So first, it was assessing, understanding. Second, it was knowing my environment there. IT was valued, but the business and the business leadership had a stronger voice. So making sure that I partnered with a strong partner. It's great to be a leader. It's great to be a CIO. With that alone, without partnership of peers and stakeholders across the table, the technology doesn't bring any value. So, building a focus and a partnership to then go with a idea, a concept. My approach is it's great for me to call out problems and to call out opportunities, but like with my team, I better well come with options of solutions and then a plan to address them. So it was, going with, in this case, you helped from a partner perspective, someone who had seen it at other companies, and having a solid plan of, options to move forward with.
And we did run into business resistance.
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely some hope. People saw the potential, but they were definitely stuck in some of the fear and the change that came with that. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I truly believe that as employees and as humans, none of us get up in the morning and say, "Hey, I want to do a bad job." We all get up, we say, "Hey, I want to do a good job." In addition to that, a lot of people get up and say, "I know how I'm valued. I know how I feel good when I come home at the end of the day. And as long as I check these 3 boxes, life is good." The overused saying of the only thing constant is change, people don't like to change.
Yeah.
So, getting through that, how do you identify the top third of people that are willing to take a risk, and then to pull the rest along? So I think it's important to recognize that it's scary, it's different, and it's okay to take a little bit of time to work through things.
Yeah. So, you have a fairly musical family, and obviously that brings its own version of discipline. And
My son
talent.
just won a cello competition this weekend.
That's
so we're
amazing. So
excited.
really
Yeah.
good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually gone to one of his actual.
Concerts?
Thank you. Is that what we call it? Yeah. I've actually gone to one of his concerts in the past, and he's actually amazing. Tell me a little bit about how these other disciplines play into the variety of a human leader, right? Because we tend to lean on the things we're good at, but then, if you're a left brain, you tend to be very logical. If you're right brain, you tend to be more creative. People lean in the directions that they. In your case, you're very structured, disciplined around the athletic side, but you also got this incredibly creative musical family component. How does that play into you and make you a better?
So I'll use a quick family story to kind of dial in the dynamics of that. When COVID hit, my daughter was off at school, my son was about ready to go to school, and my wife and I were excited to be empty nesters. Long story short, my daughter came home from spring break early, stayed, and there were 4 of us now living in a condo, and 3 of the 4 of us trying to Zoom every day. So we got to know each other a lot differently and a lot, I would say, better. So you talk about disciplines. My kids knew me as dad. I know dad has some job. Yeah, it's a fine job. And he goes off and does something. Then when they see me on Zoom calls and interacting with teams in different roles, they see that, hey, it's not just he's an IT guy, but he's a therapist in his one-on-ones. He still does his running every day. He fits in, time with mom. Mom's able to juggle all these things. So it's bundling the things in your personal life, from my opinion, to make sure that that's solid and stable, and then leveraging that to a professional life. And to your point of leaning in, for me, the analysis, the technology, that stuff came easy. So it was, how do I then leverage the I won't say softer, the other side of me and the emotional side to bring that to the table to have different aspects of who I am as a person, a team member, a boss, an employee.
Yeah. So people always talk about life balance, and I've come to recognize that there is no such thing. I refer to it more now as integration.
Yep.
Because you've got to find a way to integrate all of it. And that was such a great analogy, bringing your kids into it. But just for everybody's sake, so they know, right? So you're a multi-Ironman So that means you typically are doing 2 exercises a day, a running and a cycle or a swimming. You're the CIO of a multinational, multi-billion dollar business. You obviously have grown kids now. You're married. You've got. How do you fit all that in, and how do you find integration in your life?
For me, it's about structure and discipline. So, having a plan and kind of managing that. I would say it's easy for me to lay out my week, and I get up at 5:30, do a swim, do a run, whatever. Make sure I check my emails and top of things for work for the day. Know what meetings I'm ready for. Be prepped in advance. Blah 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 blah. And then end of the day comes. It's whatever relaxation time, and then check in on work, those sorts of things. So work is splattered in, and with all the fast changes in technology, it's even that much more. So am I waking up to a newscast or something where there's AWS outage that I need to get up early and reschedule my day to help the team manage through that? Or is it just a quiet day to move forward? So it's leveraging information in all these aspects and then acting on the information. I think for me, though, one of the most important parts is not just saying, hey, these are the things that I need to do, but also saying, hey, these are the things that aren't that important and deprioritizing because there's always more there that we could do. So not doing the things that aren't as important. And sometimes I miss on those.
Yeah. And then you find some time for some wine later in the night. Yeah. I love what you said there about using the information to reprioritize your day or your week. Let's bring us back to a little more closer to the topic at hand, right around organizations that run ERPs. And again, we'll use SAP as an example because in both cases, the last 2 jobs you had was ran SAP. The whole premise of an integrated ERP is that it's providing information real time to an organization to make better decisions, reprioritize their day. However, what we have found is that 9 out of 10 companies are not utilizing it effectively. And for those 9 that are not using effectively, they're using less than 30% of its capability. Why do you think that's the case?
I would say 3 reasons. The first is you move to an ERP, an integrated system, SAP, for what you just described. The beauty of everything is that it's integrated.
Yeah.
The curse is also that is integrated.
Right.
So, as we, in an ideal world, we want to break down silos. SAP helps us break down silos. In a human world, we still can be territorial, and we want those barriers to be able to box. Some people want those barriers to box themselves into, hey, here's my job, here's my role. So some of it is the data's there, but if someone upstream or downstream doesn't do their role, the value of the data is gone.
Right.
I would say the second is we as humans, I think, want silver bullets, easy buttons, and hey, why can't AI do this for me?
Right.
Why can't I click a button and it should be there? Sadly enough, we're not at a point yet that you just click a button and everything's there for you. So you do need to be curious. You do need to do things. And then I think third, there probably is a lack of appreciation for the tools that are there.
Yeah.
And realistically, they're good enough. They may not be exactly what people want, but just an understanding of what is there to be able to leverage and get value out of.
Yeah, I think all 3 are crucial. I think that last one in particular, the people don't know what they don't know, is such a big part of it. It's, I use the analogy of like the last thing you want to do is give your 16-year-old kid the keys to the Ferrari and say, just go drive, right? Without
or give you or I the keys to the Ferrari.
True. We would have fun with it though, but that's right. But that's kind of what happens, right? People spend millions of dollars on their quote unquote Ferrari, SAP, and then they give the keys to folks that have they weren't trained. They still have some of the old processes in their mind. They weren't brought along the journey. It's not necessarily their fault. They just weren't always part of it. And then basically get told, go run the business.
Yeah. I would throw a fourth in there and one that kind of hit home with me. The company that I'm with now, we're high growth, private equity sponsored. and phenomenal leadership team of making acquisitions, organic growth, and just being able to keep up with the business needs. There are a lot of changes in the back end ERP system that need to happen to consolidating 4 locations in Chicagoland to one state of the art distribution center. It
Right.
takes a little bit of time. Tucking in a company in Europe takes a little bit of time, effort, energy. So in my current role, it's okay, how do I, and I haven't done it as effectively as I need to or want to yet, how do I get the value out of this multi-million-dollar company that's our ERP, SAP that's set up for 80% of the business while I'm managing and helping support business growth in the current, it's here now and it has to happen.
Right. And then how do you do that in a way where you're not constantly customizing the tool
Right.
too, right?
Right.
Because that's the other challenge. The customization creates a strategic drag on the system and on the business in particular, because now everything's got a workaround, everything's got a spreadsheet, everything's got a third-party report. As a head of CIO of an IT division, how do you deal with business just running off and wanting their own little tools or their spreadsheets in particular? Spreadsheets is just everybody's favorite tool.
So, I have encouraged my team and embraced kind of letting people do that. So my role as a CIO is I'm setting the guardrails and giving the tools, and then opening it up and saying, hey, business process owner or curious data analyst, data scientist, here's what we have. Feel free to run with it. And then when we're ready to roll it out to the enterprise, then bring it back and let's make it enterprise supportable, stable, whatnot. So gone are the days of shadow IT where I say you can't do that, you
Right.
can't do this. Now it's more of, hey, here are some guardrails so that we have a strong cyber posture, we have data privacy, all those sorts of things. But just stay within that and have at it, do your thing. Let us know when you're ready to do something bigger and broader. And then plenty of times we've used that to roll it out to
Yeah.
the broader business units and organization.
And how are you addressing the boardroom conversation of AI right now? Because not everybody understands it. Not everybody grasps its value and potential detriment. And yet it's on every board's conversation and topic to the executive team saying, what are you doing about AI? What are you doing about AI?
So I'll start my response with we're not as advanced as we need to be. There is a definite desire and a definite need for us to do more. I'll then circle back with that and say, the approach that we've taken is understand the technology internally, reach out where we need help to be able to make sure that we have a platform, that we have the tools to be able to run, and then also do some homework in IT to go through some prototypes
Yeah.
to, we're smart enough to know some of what we think might be valuable from a business perspective. And then we recently set up a AI steering committee where we're getting that funnel in of the needs and trying to execute to that. So we've got a couple of things that we've been successful at. Part of our business is field service. So we've rolled out a bot that now, instead of field service technicians being in the field saying, hey, look at the website or go look for things, they have a chat agent that spans across all of our information to give error codes, instructions on how to do repairs, simple things like that. But then also 2 other layers of AI, a very important layer of digital assistant. How do we give the tools for everyone to be able to be more effective in their day-to-day job? With that, yes, we have the capability there. But what we've done with it is started a program of basic training, prompting, how do you use it in use cases? And now we have a couple of people in our commercial team that are putting together formal like walkthroughs of as a regional sales manager. Here's how you can prep for QBRs. As a marketing person, here's how you can mine data. So multiple facets.
How do you deal with the situation where, and you mentioned this is one of the reasons ERPs typically don't generate the value is because the data integrity. The people aren't maintaining the rules effectively. They don't trust the data because they're not disciplined, to your point earlier. How do you address that and the AI conversation at the same time? Because AI is so dependent on data.
So embarrassingly enough, as we've had 12 acquisitions since I've been with the company, and each of those implementations of moving the companies to SAP, we've had some level of bad data, and we didn't do the things that we knew that we should have done. Back to the projects in the 1990s,
Right.
data is the most important thing. So I let us make a mistake of we weren't as diligent on the data up front. Now we're catching up, we're cleaning data, but it's some of the same core principles
Right.
that we talked about 30 years ago. Data, master data is the lifeblood of your ERP. Transactional data, you need the right people to be able to have access to it, manage it, whatnot. So we're going back to some of the basics of how do you manage an environment to be able to have owners around each of your data objects, and then discipline to keep it clean, and then more on the usage side of it is where we say, all right, take the information from the data hub, do what you need to do with it, but we're starting to more tightly control what's in that single source of the truth.
And AI on top of a system that doesn't have a single source of truth and doesn't have all this data integrity is a little bit of accelerating the chaos to some degree.
So it's the same, the garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, it
so
hasn't
it's
changed. Right.
some of those same.
Now, you've seen this in your previous job, the one that you and I worked on together, is the benefits that come from data integrity, managing your lifeblood, as you said, the master data, educating the teams, making sure they know what they're doing, getting back to standard. You get those few principles in place. Share some of the benefits that you saw that came out of the engagement a couple years ago.
So when we worked together a few years ago, it was, at the time we didn't have a S&OP planning process. So it was the process of who owned which step of the cycle. But then you think of all of the metrics that a company looks at, everything from days on hand, inventory values, inventory turns, customer service, on time and full. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we saw upticks in all of that.
Yeah.
And at the time, that's what we needed, because we're talking about how do you grow a customer base without acquisition? You grow it by being stickier, giving better service, and you make more money by doing that more efficiently and effectively. So that's where we landed at the time was, okay, we've got now roles and responsibilities that are clear, a process that's clear, and then data that's feeding the cycle and the process for good value out of it.
And something to add to that is the gap was that you didn't have a sales and operations planning or IBP planning component, not the software, the process.
Correct.
But there was also a lack of discipline around the execution, because the old adage, right? You can forecast 100%, but if you execute like crap.
Well, we had some off-record taglines that we used: execute or be executed. We made it a part of people's, and it all goes back to aligned goals. So we made it a part of everyone's goal that, hey, you have to execute your job properly. You have to maintain the data, maintain the discipline. And, not everyone came along, but the early adopters pulled the middle along, and then some people, unfortunately, well, I would say fortunately, because it's okay for people to move on to different roles that are a better fit. So it helped us as we moved to make sure that we had the right discipline around it.
So one thing that always fascinates me is the business that benefits the most from an integrated ERP like SAP often doesn't see the need themselves to put in the effort. It feels a little bit like IT's got to fix it, make it work. How do you switch that ownership for them to realize that the technology is really there for them, not really just an IT system that needs to work for them?
That's a great question. And, I think the answer to that partially is that leaders and CIOs are sometimes psychologists too. Like, it isn't a mandate, and hey, here's an edict. It's more of, I think of it, I grew up in Wisconsin, so I think of it as farming. Plant a seed, water it.
Yeah.
It's someone else's idea. Make it different approaches and strategies so that it's not Jeff's idea. It's not Jeff's team's idea. Sometimes it might be, but having the right sponsor stakeholder latch onto it, and then bring the passion to say, okay, broader organization. What does this mean? So, and that's one way. The other way, I've been fortunate enough where I am now that I have a leadership team that's passionate about growth.
Yeah.
And the top-down support, and our COO recently said, "Hey, we've got to be better at customer service." So we're pulling a tiger team together, and he's championing it. So it feels good that we've got CEO, COO, leadership team saying, "Hey, let's do things that make a difference."
Yeah, and I was actually talking to one of my previous guests, and they were talking about one of the missing ingredients with a business case is passion, and it's not measurable to some degree, right? But you can feel it if it's there. When people have that passion, when leaders have that passion, they want to make a difference, even with passion. And why do we feel like people tend to just kind of give up on the ERP at some point? It feels, at least from my perspective, that there's a lot of passion and excitement about getting it up and running and implemented and working, and then at some point it's like, okay, it's like electricity. It should just work.
I think two things there. I think, yes, one, it should just work. I think a lot of ERP rollouts and implementations, companies or teams get stable, and they forget that they de-scoped some things when they went live.
Yeah.
And that you talk about the valley of despair. You get a team, IT team, business team, over the hump and live. People take a breath, and then they may fall off of the path of, hey, what am I supposed to do? They may lose their passion, and it's kind of going back to, okay, here's the standard process, here's what you're supposed to do, and then follow up of, what's the optimization cycle look like, and all with the same functionality, but really just kind of revisiting what did we say we were going to deliver? What are the standard processes? Now, how do we improve it? So I'm big at, and you said earlier, transformation is probably an overused word.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in transformation first and then continuous improvement. I think with some companies, they look at continuous improvement, they want to tweak things, and in my mind, that kills transformation. So go in with something that's big, is going to make a difference, but then have the courage and the get over your fear of failure and the willingness to say, hey, I'm going back and I'm committed to this, I'm dedicated to it, and work through the optimization and continuous improvement cycles.
I love that, because the micro optimizations don't move the needle.
Right.
They make incremental improvements. If you really want to move the needle, you got to make some form of an effort, right? Transformational effort.
And I think, too, I'd be interested on your perspective of this, because you see it across multiple different companies. Being able to have the courage as a leader to say no, as opposed to pretending like you're going to listen to everyone.
Yeah.
So, there's a rating or a scaling of what's the most important for a reason. I think it's okay to leave things off the list.
Absolutely. Actually, I mean, more recent, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, strategy is actually all about you saying no to the things that you think you need to do versus the things you have to do. So no is a big part of it. Eliminating, simplifying, getting back to the basics. No company can do more than 4 or 5 focus things anyway. If you think of, if a CEO is sitting there and he's got 20 KPIs and he's trying to drive to all of them, it's going to fail, right? Yeah. But if you got 2 or 3 or 4, that's really the goal for the year or the 2 years, that matters. And then that has to permeate through. And so saying no is a big part of it. So chasing AI for the sake of chasing AI, or doing this, buying this new machinery because that's the latest whiz-buzz thing, sometimes that you got to say no to that until you can deal with some of the other challenges you face, especially if they're more fundamental in your growth, right? So no, I agree. It's a challenge. Speaking of which, so think of that for a second, right? Why do companies or leaders, let's talk business leaders specifically, don't see that after they've invested in this ERP that they have, why do they not see the need to continue to invest in making into the people now and making sure it's better?
I'll talk out of both sides of my mouth here, and I'll say on one side of the equation, I think publicly traded companies have a challenge of they need to have an immediate story or an immediate message around, hey, what are you doing this quarter? Where are your earnings? And
Yeah.
there's an extreme pressure of you've got to meet or beat what the street knows.
Yeah.
So I think there's pressure there. And that pressure, in my opinion, is sometimes easier to alleviate with a new project or a new technology, as opposed to the people side of it, which takes time
That's
and
fair.
takes effort. So long-term
point.
thinkers know that you need the right people in the right seats, to be able to execute and be a better, more successful full company. Short-sighted vision is, hey, what's that person doing for me now?
Yeah. I love
so
that.
yeah,
That's so true.
so that's one side of it. The other side of it is, I think there is a focus on, I mentioned it earlier, the easy button. And I don't think everyone looks at organizational change or organizational readiness in the same lens. I think the good leaders see that everyone's different and it's okay to move people to their strengths. I think some leaders look at it as, hey, there's a career projection or there are paths and steps everyone needs to take. Everyone has to take their own path, and leaders and businesses, organizations need to help people find that path, not force people down the same paths. And I think sometimes, forcing people into seats that don't make sense,
Right.
slows things as well.
That's such a good point. And I want to touch on that distinction you made between public company and PE owned. You're currently working for a company who's PE owned. And so the public company, as you said, is often short-term driven, quarterly driven. What can I do now to show real value fast? So often it's the easy button or quick fix or project. The PE has similar pressures, but maybe a little longer over time. Like we still got to improve cash flow, get EBITDA going. There's different pressures and maybe over different time spans. How does that translate for you? Like, because in reality, the pressure is the same. It's just maybe the time frame in which you're allowed to get it done. And then second part of that question is does that then allow you to really invest in the people side of things because there's a little more patience? And maybe as a matter of fact, is there really patience?
First, I'll say the company that I'm with now, we're on the company's third PE ownership. I've been there for 2, and both of our sponsors have been tremendous in support of us growing the business and our leadership team driving the right direction. So I think we've been fortunate that it's been a great fit of a sponsor, a PE owner that's willing to invest and willing to work with us. Both started with, hey, let's make sure priorities are aligned, values are aligned, and then execute. There is pressure, and I think that's part of what has me excited about it. There's pressure, and in this case, I'll say but instead of and. I said, but there is a willingness to try things. And as long as, from my perspective, I've been given the leniency to do what I think is right. If I make a mistake, I find it quickly and then course correct. So there's the latitude to be able to make a mistake, as long as there's enough due diligence that I put into it. So it's even faster paced than I think most people think. In the same regard, we're, I think, building so much value, creating so much value along the way that it's worth the fast pace, all the excitement. So the first part of the question, I think, is yes, the pressure is still there. The second part of the question, okay, am I able to respond to that? Or are we able to drive through that? Short answer is yes. The ability to be able to, and I guess in this case, more broadly, it is tied to, our executive leadership team strategy. You laid out EBITDA, all PE sponsored firms, that's what we care about.
Right.
It has implications of in the IT space. I no longer capitalize things the way I could have. So there are different nuances where there are impacts, but as long as there's an understanding from everyone on where we're headed, we're able to push in that direction.
I was going to ask you about the EBITDA thing because it's usually EBITDA or cash, right? Those are the
Yeah.
two things that
Free cash flow.
Free
so
cash
EBITDA
flow.
and free cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah, and that comes down to how well am I using my working capital, how well am I using my human capital,
Yep.
all of those investments. And again, you listen to that working capital, human capital. Very rarely is technology capital part of that conversation. Why? Why?
I would say the most important reason there, it's been only the last handful of years where I think people have focused on technology capital. So it's a lot easier. We're in the packaging business. It's a lot easier to tie EBITDA and cash flow to investing in a new packaging machine. You can measure throughput, you can measure sales, you can measure margin, rolling it out in ERP. I still am not able to clearly articulate
Right.
the value of our millions of dollars investment in SAP has been.
Right.
Our leadership, our owners know that there's value. It's not easy to articulate.
Right.
So I think that's part of why. And I'll use but again. I said but with all the challenges in cyber these days, the introduction of AI, it's gotten much more of a spotlight. And without basic foundational things,
That's right.
and then building on them, the businesses can't leverage that technical asset. So in the past, it was, I think, sweat the technical assets.
Yeah.
Who cares about technology? Who cares about IT? It's now in the forefront, and leaders care.
Yeah, you have to
PE
sweat the
firms
asset.
care. Yep.
You have to sweat there, and they have to understand an SAP or the ERP is an asset.
Yep.
It's probably one of the biggest spends you'll ever make in your organization in one single tool.
Yep.
Is in your ERP technology. I think where some companies
And I think it's still the best decision we made from a
Yeah.
technology perspective.
I agree with you.
Yep.
I mean, there's many ERPs out there, but SAP is for sure still the Rolls Royce. One of the things that I find fascinating too is people struggle with this business case to move to the new S/4HANA version. Funny enough, they call it a transformation, which is really just an upgrade. But let's not put the technical jargon in front of it. But as a matter of fact, it really isn't about whether you can build a business case for S4 versus your old version. It's really, can you build a business case that SAP, period, no matter what version you're on,
Right.
is an asset and driving value. And if you can define that, then upgrading will be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But
and in that aspect, the way you describe it there, Martin, you could swap out SAP with any
Exactly
ERP.
right.
It is about a business case, and it's about what improvements are you driving, and really it's okay. Everything that I look at is how am I helping the top line? That's what I want to do more of. How do I help grow the business, or how am I being more efficient and kind of cutting costs in the bottom line? It's less now, in my mind, focusing on that cost cutting. What do you do on this efficiency side, and more on how do you grow? How can I get my help the ops team get inventory levels in balance, keep them low, keep turns high, those sorts of things to be able to be more productive and profitable on the top line. So Martin, with me kind of rambling a little bit, are you hearing the same things from other CIOs that you work with? And, what are you seeing from a company that's built a huge brand on helping with understanding the basics, shifting the spotlight a little bit off of the technology onto the people and onto the process?
Yeah.
Do you see that still as the path forward? Or are you shifting at all your mindset, your business, to say, hey, there's different technology that could be a silver bullet? Or is it still a
yeah, I don't know
focus?
about the silver bullet part yet. I think silver bullets are going to take some time and to get there. But I do think CIOs are pulled in too many directions right now because they have the what are you doing about the AI question? What are you doing about cybersecurity question? Very rarely are they asked, what are you doing about your ERP?
Right.
Because it's kind of like, hey, it's supposed to just work. Exposing them to the fact that actually, if you get that working, it makes cybersecurity better, it makes AI better. So fundamentally, it's still the right place to focus. But to your point, it's not the technology. SAP will continue to upgrade and get better and better and better and better. But it's those fundamentals. It's people, process, and a smart use of the technology, not the technology itself. It's how well are we using it?
Are you seeing, when you say the proverbial we, are you seeing a shift as you look across other companies of demographics of some of us who have worked in ERP for decades as opposed to months or years? Are you seeing, or what are you seeing from a people side of the new workforce and some of the changes there?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if you think about where technology is going, it's basically going to eliminate what they call the dirty work, right? And it's no different than what we've been talking about for 20 years, which is manage the rules to manage the business. Don't manage the transactions. The transactions is the dirty work. Like, I don't need to have to create POs and requisitions and sales orders. Technology can do that for me. Let's put in the rules that allow it to do it.
Yep.
I think where technology is going to go is the same, but instead of having to go into master data management, you may have an AI that says, hey, you know what, AI, can you please assess my lead time analysis based on this particular supplier? And then based on the analysis, let's change it to ABC. There's still a very much a human decision-making process behind that needs to happen, because that's critical thinking.
Yes.
If you don't have the critical thinking, and that's where AI is incredibly good with predicting, right? Because it's predicting off of data, it's using modeling for that. But at the end of the day, somebody's going to make a decision, and that critical thinking is crucial for that.
I'm hearing you say the human in the loop is
The human
is
in the
important.
loop. Right? Yeah. Well, you said earlier, like human is the human middleware.
Yeah.
We often refer to it as the human MRP. Like it's still people are trying to physically make it work, kind of push it along the way. And technology has long time said, just let go.
Right.
Just I'll do the work for you. Just tell me what you want. And that principle hasn't sunk in yet. And I think when people invest in that, the outcomes to PE firms or not is going to be so massive from an EBITDA, profit, and capital perspective that everything else starts getting easier, because then you truly have a solid foundation. Yeah.
Well, and it is, what I'm hearing you say is some of the type A personality, I need to control everything and keep it the way I want it,
Right.
is like those are rules of old. So there's no
Those rules
longer
are
the
old.
value of what used to be, I'm the specialist that can do a certain thing. Now it's, I'm the thinker who's making decisions.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about prompt engineering and all of that. And again, that's no different than, people thinking and using first principles to make decisions, being an engineer myself, if I had a CAD drawing and it produces a design for me, but I don't understand why it made these choices, that building's going to collapse most likely, right? So there's some relevance to that even now in the more generic business ERP world. You got to understand what it's doing. Otherwise, and it will continue to get better. I mean, even now, SAP is, when it runs an MRP as an example, it'll say, do you want to buy this? Do you want to make this? Do you want to, by the way, it's starting to recommend things. So it's getting smarter. But where's it getting that data from? It's the rules. It's this, whatever you've told it, how you want to think about it.
Well, and what you're describing too is you talk about rules in an ERP to drive good data to kind of have the transactions manage themselves. AI is the same concept, right? It's just rules.
That's exactly right. It's just rules.
Where does it end?
I feel like we're going to need a beer to answer that question. Hey, Jeff, this was a pleasure. I loved hanging out with you. Thank you for all this time. It's good to see you again. Keep up it. I know you got an Ironman coming up pretty soon. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Martin.
I'll be cheering you on for sure.
Good to be in touch.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.